You walk into a quiet clinic for your first acupuncture session. You expect thin metal needles. You expect soft music, maybe a little lavender oil. What you probably don't expect is a small stick of dried herbs. It glows at the tip like a tiny campfire. The smell hits you first. It's earthy, it's heavy. It smells like old wood and dried leaves after rain. For a second, you think something might be burning. No, this is Moxibustion. And here's the strange part. In Chinese, the word for acupuncture means needle and Moxibustion. Needles are only half the story. Today, we talk about the other half. Hey friends, this is Eastern Inner. I'm Ollie, just me, talking to you. So, I have a confession. The first time I smelled Moxa, I thought someone was burning old socks. Not in a bad way, more like a campfire that had been left to smolder in a forest. It took me a while to get used to it. But once I did, I started to notice something. That smell meant heat, real heat, the kind that goes deep. Not the surface heat of a hot water bottle, something that moves. Now, the article this episode is based on asks a simple question. It wants to know why the person you see for acupuncture hasn't told you about Moxibustion. I want to answer that. But first, let me tell you what Moxibustion actually is. Moxibustion is the art of warming specific points on the body. The tool is a dried herb called mugwort. In Chinese, we call it ai ye. Ai ye. Ai ye is a leafy plant. It grows in many parts of Asia and Europe. People have used it for thousands of years, not just in medicine either. They stuffed pillows with it. They hung bundles in doorways. They burned it to keep insects away. At certain times of the year, people tied fresh sprigs over the entrance to the house. It was part of the seasonal rhythm, a plant that smelled like protection and freshness. In early summer, people hung mugwort and other sweet-smelling plants over doorframes. It was less about illness and more about marking the season. The same smell that fills a treatment room also drifted through courtyards and kitchens. That is why it doesn't feel foreign to people who grew up with it. It was a working plant, the kind you bumped into every day. That ordinary domestic side of mugwort tells you how old it really is. It was never a rare medicine kept on a high shelf. It grew by the road. It dried in the sun. It hung in the kitchen. The same herb that warmed old winter legs also sat over the front door. In summer, that kind of everyday use says a lot. People harvest the leaves, dry them, and age them. The aging part matters. Fresh mugwort is too sharp. Old mugwort is soft and slow. After aging, they grind it into a fluffy wool. Sometimes they roll the wool into sticks that look like cigars. Other times, they shape it into small golden cones. The cones can sit on a slice of ginger or on a clove of garlic. The choice of ginger or garlic is not random. Ginger adds a warm, moving push. Garlic has its own sharp ability to break up stuck cold. In old practice, a thin layer gave a steady, even heat. It also kept the moxa from touching the skin directly. Then the person lights the moxa. It doesn't burn with a flame, it smolders. Slowly, the heat goes into the skin. This heat is not like a heating pad. A heating pad stays on the surface. Moxa heat feels alive. It moves. It travels. In traditional Chinese medicine, we say moxa strongly warms yang. Yang is the active, warming principle of your body. When cold or stagnation settles deep in your muscles and joints, moxa can wake up the flow of qi. Qi is your vital life force. It's the energy that moves through your body. When it slows down, you feel tired, you feel stiff, you feel cold. Moxa helps it move again. That's the difference between warm air and warm blood. One passes over you, the other changes how the tissue feels. There's a specific pattern the old texts talk about. It belongs to people with yang deficiency or cold stagnation, cold hands and feet, fatigue, a pale tongue, and a dull aching pain that feels much better when you put a warm compress on it. If that sounds like you, Moxa might be the missing piece. On the other hand, if you run hot, Moxa might not be your friend. I mean, inflammation with redness, fever, hot flashes, night sweats. Adding fire to fire is not a great idea. The old texts are very clear about this. Warmth is medicine, but only when the body is asking for it. The old teachers put it simply: use heat for cold, use cool for heat. If your tongue is red, your pulse is rapid, and your joints are swollen and hot, this is probably not your therapy. So, back to the story, the clinic, the smoke. Most people don't know about this, and there's a reason. Here's the honest answer. It's not about whether Moxa works. Most people who study acupuncture spend hundreds of hours learning Moxibustion. They know it well. They practice it in school. They pass exams on it. The real reason is much more boring. It's about smoke. It's about landlords. It's about fire alarms. And it's about money. Let me break that down. First, the smoke. Traditional Moxa produces thick white smoke. It lingers, it gets into curtains, it gets into carpet, it gets into your clothes. If the person you see rents a room in a modern office building, the landlord probably says no. The smell travels through the vents. Other tenants complain. It's not a small issue, it's a daily problem. Second, fire alarms. This is a big one. A single stick of good Moxa can set off a building-wide fire alarm in seconds. Think about that. You're lying on the table, warm and relaxed. Then the alarm goes off. Everyone in the building walks outside. The fire department shows up. All because of a little dried herb. Many city clinics just don't want to deal with that. It's not a bad smell. It's a bad business day. Third, insurance. Many business insurance policies charge more for anything with an open flame. Needles are simple. They don't burn. Moxa does. For a small clinic, the extra cost can be a real burden. Add in local fire department rules, and the paperwork gets thick. Some places decide it's just not worth it. Fourth, expectations. Westerners expect clean, quiet, odorless medical spaces. The person you see might think you'll hate the smell. They might worry you'll think the smoke is unsafe. They might worry you'll cancel your next appointment. So they just don't mention it. They stick with needles. It's easier, it's cleaner, it's familiar. I've also seen people react to the smell before they try it. They worry about a smoky room. But the smell is more like a campfire than cigarette smoke. It airs out faster than you might expect. So here's the irony. Moxibustion is not a secret because it doesn't work. It's a secret because it's inconvenient. Now let me tell you why that's such a loss. In the old texts, Moxa was not a backup plan. It was an equal partner with needles. Needling and Moxa grew up side by side. For over 2,000 years, they were taught together, practiced together, and written about together. There's a famous line from one of the classic texts, often called the spiritual pivot. It says, "What the needle cannot reach, Moxa is fit for." Let me say that again. What the needle cannot reach, Moxa is fit for. Think about that for a moment. If your qi is too weak, if you're too depleted, a needle might not be enough. A needle can redirect energy. But if the energy is already very low, you need to add something. You need raw warmth. That's Moxa. It builds strength when the body has nothing left to move. There's a wonderful book called Celestial Lancets. It was written by two researchers, Lu Guizhen and Joseph Needham. They spent years combing through old manuscripts, illustrations, and case notes. They wanted to understand how the old doctors actually used heat. Their work shows that Moxa was never a second choice. In many periods, it was treated as the equal partner, the warming half of the medicine. Lu Guizhen and Joseph Needham were careful researchers. They did not treat Moxa as a curiosity. They placed it inside the same intellectual tradition as needling. That matters because it changes the story. Moxa is not an add-on. It is half of the picture. When the body was too cold, too weak, too empty, the old doctors reached for fire. And they wrote about it the same way they wrote about needling. It wasn't a folk habit. It was a core part of the medicine. Modern research is starting to catch up with this old idea. Scientists have looked at the infrared spectrum of burning mugwort. They found that it can penetrate the skin and increase local blood flow. That's not magic, that's physics and biology. The heat from Moxa sits in a specific infrared range. That range happens to match what the body responds to best for increased circulation. Mugwort burns in a part of the infrared spectrum that the body absorbs well. Some researchers compare it to a gentle light that turns on circulation. The warming is not just surface. It reaches tissue a few centimeters down. There was a 2024 meta-analysis published in the journal Medicine. Researchers looked at 10 randomized controlled trials. That's almost 1,000 people with chronic low back pain. 987 people, to be exact. The studies tracked pain during movement, stiffness after rest, and how easily people could do daily tasks. Some trials lasted a few weeks. Others ran for a few months. The people in these studies were not athletes. They were regular adults with ongoing back pain. They had trouble standing, bending, and sleeping. Moxa did not fix everything, but it gave many of them a kind of ease that lasted after the session ended. The group that got Moxibustion reported much better physical function and comfort than the control group. People said their backs felt looser. The targeted heat seemed to relax deep muscle tissue and ease that guarded tightness. Then there's a 2023 review on knee osteoarthritis. That one came out in evidence-based complementary and alternative medicine. It pulled together several trials with hundreds of people. The researchers looked at pain levels, morning stiffness, and walking distance. They measured how stiff people felt after sitting and how much pain they had after activity. The Moxa groups did better on those measures. Morning stiffness is a classic sign of cold stagnation in the old model. So it is interesting that the review noted less stiffness after the Moxa treatments. People could move earlier in the day. That is a small practical change with real meaning. The data suggested that the infrared warmth from mugwort combined with the herb's natural compounds may help loosen stiff joints. People who received the heat reported better movement and less of that heavy, stuck feeling. It drives fresh blood into cold, congested areas. That's the old idea of cold stagnation measured in a modern lab. Now, I want to be honest with you. These studies are not perfect. The number of people is still small compared to big drug trials, but the direction is interesting and it matches what the old texts have said for 2,000 years. Let me bring you back to the feeling of a real session, because that's what I find most fascinating. The smell hits first, earthy, heavy, a little sweet. Some people love it right away. Some people need a minute. Then comes the heat. The person holding the Moxa stick hovers it a few inches from your skin. You feel a soft warmth. Then the warmth starts to spread. It moves outward. It travels along lines you didn't know you had. Sometimes the warmth arrives in pulses. It starts as a bright point, and then becomes a wide ring. If the stick moves, the heat follows in a slow trail. Some people describe it as sunlight through a window, the kind that makes you close your eyes. There are 2 points that come up again and again in Moxa sessions. One is ST36. That's short for stomach 36. The Chinese name means leg 3 miles. It sits on the lower leg, just below the knee. ST36 sits about a hand width below the kneecap. Just outside the shin bone, people use this point to build qi, help digestion, and strengthen the body when you feel run down. It's one of the most famous points in the whole system. In the old days, people would warm this point at home as a daily tonic. The other point is CV4. That's short for Conception Vessel 4. The Chinese name means gate of origin. It sits on the lower abdomen, a few fingers below the belly button. CV4 sits about 3 finger widths below the navel. You don't need a needle or a chart to feel the heat in those spots. In the tradition, this point is where your original qi and your essence are rooted. Warming this point with Moxa is said to restore deep energy, warm the lower abdomen, and support reproductive health. It's a gentle, powerful spot. When the heat reaches these points, a lot of people say it feels like a warm wave. It melts tension you didn't know you were holding. Your shoulders drop. Your jaw unclenches. Your hands rest open on the table. Your breathing slows. After a couple of minutes, the smell fades into the background. It stops being sharp and becomes part of the room, like wood smoke on a winter coat. The heat spreads in slow rings. It starts at one point and rolls outward, down a leg, up the back. Sometimes people drift into that half sleep where you can still hear the room. That nap feeling is common. You are warm, heavy, and very far away. Does it hurt? No, it shouldn't. In a session, the Moxa stick stays inches away from your skin, or it sits on a barrier like a slice of ginger. You feel deep warmth, not a burn. If it ever feels too hot, you say so. The person holding the Moxa moves it away. That's how it should work. Warm, safe, under your control. I remember my first time. The heat started on my lower leg. I didn't expect much. I thought it would be like holding a hot cup of tea. But then the warmth traveled up my leg. It stayed with me for about an hour. I walked out of that room feeling like someone had wrapped me in a warm blanket from the inside. For the rest of the afternoon, I felt calm, loose, and a little sleepy in the best way. My legs stayed warm even after I stepped outside. I didn't want to rush around. I just wanted to sit still and let the warmth settle. I slept like a rock that night. That afterglow is hard to describe. It's not dramatic. It just feels like your body has been quietly put back in order. Now, there's one more thing people ask about: the smoke. Many places now use smokeless Moxa rolls. They're made from carbonized mugwort. They burn with almost no visible smoke. You still get the deep heat, you just don't fill the room with a cloud. That makes them practical for apartments and offices with strict fire alarms. Some places offer both styles. You can choose what suits your nose. People also ask about trying Moxa at home. The short answer is yes, but there's a traditional way to learn. Most people get hands-on training from someone who does this regularly first. That person shows them how to light the stick, how to hold it, and where to place the heat. When you're done, you press the glowing tip into a bowl of dry sand or rice, not water. Water can ruin the roll. A Moxa stick is a lot like a lit candle. It's simple, but it needs respect. The smell clings to fabric, but a window open for 10 minutes clears it. In some older families, warming ST36 was a daily habit. You might see a small red mark on a grandparent's leg from the Moxa stick. It was as normal as a cup of soup. So, let me come back to where we started. You walk into a clinic, you expect needles. But now you know there's a whole other half of the medicine. It's warm, it's smoky, it's a little inconvenient, but it's also very old and very powerful. The next time you call to book a session, you might ask one simple question. Do they offer Moxibustion? If they don't, maybe they know someone who does. That question might open a door you didn't know existed. So that's today's episode. We talked about Moxibustion, the forgotten half of acupuncture, the warmth that comes from a dried herb called mugwort. In Chinese, ai ye. We talked about why clinics skip it, smoke, alarms, insurance, expectations. We talked about the old line, what the needle cannot reach, Moxa is fit for. We looked at recent research on back pain and knee pain, and we talked about what a session feels like. Warm, deep, and surprisingly relaxing. Next time, we're moving from fire to food. It's late summer and early autumn in many places, so we'll talk about pears. Yes, pears. In Chinese medicine, pears are famous for moistening the lungs and soothing a dry cough. I'll explain why. And I'll share a simple way to eat them that feels like a dessert but acts like medicine. Team, thanks for listening. This was East and Inner. If this connected with you, join us on Apple Podcasts. Just search East and Inner. The full written article is at tcmway.net. This podcast is for educational purposes only, not medical advice. Please consult your doctor before making any health changes. Full articles and references at tcmway.net. Talk to you next time.